it's either emotional in some way, so customers have a strong visceral personal reaction to it, or it's so useful that they recommend it because it is incredibly helpful to other people.
Hello, and welcome to Sink or Swim, a bi-weekly podcast brought to you by RentSync, where we provide an insider's look into the prop tech, multifamily, and rental housing industry. In each episode, we take a deep dive into the technologies and strategies that have helped companies overcome operational challenges and increase the value of their multifamily investments. So, without further delay, let's get into today's discussion.
Welcome back to Sink or Swim. I'm Mitch Fanning with RentSync, formerly LWS. And joining me today is Baer, who many of you might know as that inspirational plaid-wearing keynote speaker, who also happens to be a trusted advisor to some of the world's most iconic brands. And of course, if that wasn't enough, Jay is also the author of 6 best-selling books, including Youtility for Real Estate, which we'll be talking a little bit about today. Jay, how you doing today?
Mitch, thanks very much. Delighted to be here.
So one thing I left out in that intro was that if we can remember that far back, 2020 has been one of those years it felt like it's gone on forever. But you also did the keynote at our event in 2015.
Yeah.
So welcome back.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. It's been too long.
So as I mentioned kind of in the intro, we're going to talk a little bit about how real estate professionals can build trust and create useful marketing, help versus that sell mentality. And given the situation we're in with COVID, I think it's very timely.
Mm-hmm.
But before we dive in, I want to start maybe in a kind of a peculiar place and ask you a little bit about your grandfather's license plate, which says it's oak. And I saw that in a video on your website, and it's according to your video, it's on your fireplace mantle.
It's actually, I have it right here. That's it. Like literally, that is it. I'm holding it. It's actually in my office, right in front of me.
That sounds like oak, just the way you hit that.
Yeah. It's actually metal, but yes. It's right here. I am a 7th generation entrepreneur. My son's an 8th generation entrepreneur. My family has been self-employed since the 1850s. And my grandfather was the owner, several generations into it, of a furniture store called Baer's Furniture and Carpets in York, Nebraska, which was sort of the furniture destination for that part of the Midwestern U.S. And farmers would come in, mostly farmers, would come in from miles around, and that's where they'd go to buy their furniture. Well, this slogan, "It's Oak," has been the family furniture store slogan for almost all the way back to the beginning in 1850. And here's why. Turns out that in the early days of sort of the furniture biz in the United States, what would happen is unscrupulous furniture retailers would create a dresser or a bed, what have you. Of course, everything was handmade at that time. And they would make it with less expensive wood, and they would just paint it or stain it oak color, and then they would fill it full of buckshot or some other kind of material to make it feel heavy, because a lot of times people would buy furniture essentially based on weight. Like if it's heavy, it must be good, because oak is a very heavy and dense grained wood. So our slogan was all the way back, if Baer says it's oak, it's oak. If Baer says it's oak, it's oak. And so that was my grandfather's license plate. It says it's oak right on it. And I really like that approach. I think it speaks to the importance of trust. And as somebody who was in the professional services business almost my entire life, that's really all I have. Like, I don't make anything. I don't know anything really. It's not like I can build a plane. What I have is that people trust me to help them build their business. That's all I have. And so I sort of feel like if Baer says it's oak is sort of like if Jay Baer says it's good content marketing, it's good content marketing, or something along. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So, I mean, trust obviously is huge. Now, in that video, you also claim, and it was this is what also resonated with me, that there was 2 ways to succeed in marketing today. Mm-hmm. You can be either proportionately or disproportionately emotional, mm-hmm. or you can be massively relevant.
Yeah.
So, I'd love to also hear more about that. Would you mind kind of elaborating?
Well, I mean, one of my favorite sayings in the history of business is from Robert Stevens, who's the founder of Geek Squad, the services arm of
Right,
Best
right.
Buy. And Robert once said that advertising is a tax paid by the unremarkable. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, because if you're trying to build your business, and most of us are, yes, you could pay to do that, but that is probably not a good long-term solution. Advertising attention continues to fade away. Advertising fees on a per impression basis continue to go up in many cases. I mean, it is possible for sure. And there's lots of examples of people doing it well, but it's a tough row to hoe. Ultimately, the audience is the algorithm, right? The audience decides what marketing is effective and what marketing is ineffective. And the best marketing is the marketing where the customers really power it. They become volunteer marketers. Certainly that's true online with clicks and shares and referrals and dark social and all of that. And then the question becomes, well, all right, well, how do you turn your customers into volunteer marketers? And typically it's just that. It's either emotional in some way, so customers have a strong visceral personal reaction to it, or it's so useful that they recommend it because it is incredibly incredibly helpful to other people. I talk more about that premise and sort of word of mouth and how it works in my newest book, which is called Talk Triggers.
Yeah, again, I said I was going to go off script, but I didn't think I was going to go off script this early. Um, Again, I'm kind of from the kind of B2B space, and being Rinsink being in multifamily, I don't have a background in it. But one thing I've noticed, specifically when it comes to the situation we're in, is that keeping your tenants and renewing is probably has always been important, but almost is just as important now, if not more
Yep.
important than
Yep.
it has ever been. And it really comes down to that, providing a good resident experience throughout the leasing stage, and also the renewal stage as well. So it's kind of interesting. It's always been important, zero cost marketing, word of mouth, but in every industry, specifically multifamily or real estate,
Yeah.
it's also important. So
Yeah. I did a huge a multifamily keynote last week for a big organization that has hundreds and hundreds of properties under management. And I really emphasized that point, Mitch, that look, you don't really have secret sauce. I mean, do you have nice properties? Yeah. Do you have nice amenities? Yeah. Are they priced fairly? Yeah. Do you have good leasing staff? Well, yeah. But so do all of your competitors. It's not as if you have this like magic bean that nobody can possibly touch. It is such an incredibly competitive business, because in truth, the differentiation at the product or service level is almost non-existent. And so in categories where you don't have an innate product advantage or an innate pricing advantage, the only advantage you can possibly cobble together is an experiential advantage. That's literally the list, right? And it's amazing to me how few people in property understand that still, right? Like that is your competitive weapon, is to deliver something to the residents that they don't expect, and in doing so turn them into advocates for the property.
no, I couldn't agree more. So switching gears a bit, let's talk about the book. Excuse me. So utility for real estate. Now,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, despite it being published 6 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
the when I was kind of flipping through it, and I was kind of picking certain areas of it to read, it really felt very relevant even today. So I guess my first question would be, do you agree with that? Of course, and then why do you think that's the case?
Oh, I absolutely do. In fact, my agent and I talked about it the other day. Like, the entire Youtility series, the first book, Youtility, and then Youtility for real estate and Youtility for accountants. It's sort of a trio. That premise is more resonant than ever with people, because we all know that we want to have a relationship with businesses that transcends the transaction. we want to be able to rely upon them. And this idea of coming, head first into it and saying, here's my promotion, 1 month free, it just doesn't work over the long term, right? You've got to do something different than that to break through. And it's been really interesting. I've had a lot of resurging interest in those books, in the accompanying keynote, etc. Although I will tell you that seems to happen to the books that I write. Like it makes sense when it comes out, and then you sit with it for 3 or 4 years. Like, oh, it actually makes more sense now than it did before. Maybe I should just put all my projects on pause for like 4 years and then write them. Maybe I'm writing them too fast. Maybe that's the problem.
Well, I mean, it definitely is evergreen. A lot of the things that you speak to, which again is a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I want to kind of drill into is, the first thing that kind of stuck out, and this is kind of maybe, again, going off script, but the word utility.
Mm-hmm.
What does that actually mean to you? And specifically, like, where did you get that? Where'd you get that term from?
Yeah. We should say for the listeners, it's spelled Youtility, utility.
Yes.
And utility, we define it as marketing so useful that people would pay for it. It's when you're giving prospective customers, so much value that if you said, hey, would you actually give us money in exchange for our marketing? They'd be like, you know what, I would. I absolutely would. That's a big difference between marketing that people tolerate or marketing that people don't hate to marketing that people would actually pay for. It turns your marketing at some level into a viable product. Now, of course, you would not, in almost any case, actually charge for your marketing, but it meets that test, right? It's that good, it's that useful, it's that relevant and current that people would say, yeah, I'd give you a little money for that.
So,
and I came up with it literally in the shower. I was like, I need to come up with one word that sort of defines this premise, right? Because marketing so useful, people would pay for it is a great concept, but a terrible book title. And so I was like, I need something that describes this in a way that can be kind of a hook that people will recognize on sight as kind of Jay's premise. And it just popped into my head.
I love it. A lot of, obviously that's the cliche. A lot of ideas come from the shower. Are there any companies, and it doesn't have to be in, the multifamily space, that you're seeing as a result of, say, even, again, we'll just use COVID as an example because there's a lot of innovation happening, that you're seeing you're like, wow, that is really useful marketing, and it's really they're almost doubling down or applying that you wouldn't have expected. Any things that you've seen so far?
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
You know what's interesting? It's a good question. There's not as many companies doing it for the first time since the pandemic. And I think it's because, even though it makes sense, right? I think it's because utility as a marketing premise tends to take a while.
Sure.
Right? Because you're winning hearts and minds of prospective customers a few at a time using information and helpfulness. And you can't really throw gas on that fire. And right now, because everybody's a little uncertain economically, most CMOs and CEOs are looking for more of an accelerated pace and a quicker pipeline fill. And so while there are definitely organizations that are leaning into it, not as many as I would have expected. One of my clients is a marketing automation platform called SharpSpring, and they specialize in agencies. And so they have a program, a utility-based program that my team and I actually created called the Agency Acceleration Series, where we got 12 marketing influencers together, and every other week there's another free webinar, Ask Me Anything, live stream Q&A with Ann Handley and Seth Godin and Neil Patel and Rand Fishkin, and none of it has any fees associated with it whatsoever. The idea is to say, all right, let's bring together this truly outstanding collection of marketing leaders and have them address questions that agencies actually have right now during the pandemic. And it's been wildly successful. So that's one example that we've tried to turn up in the recent present actually.
It's interesting, again, we probably could talk about this. We probably could have a separate conversation or a podcast episode about this. But I always find, and I'm gonna kind of age myself because you started showing up on my radar back probably 2008, 2009 when social media was started to become more prevalent. It's always interesting how when something new or there's a change that's occurring, like say COVID, that people need to pivot. People who are kind of doing it, they win, they accelerate, and then people who aren't try to take something that they know or are familiar with and try to pivot, but they do it incorrectly. So, for example, taking events and trying to make them virtual, and not reimagining what an event would be. They're just trying to take the physical event and putting it on screen. And I'm sure we could go down a rabbit hole here, but it's always useful. It's always interesting to see that where you're like, the people who are essentially they're not they're very few of them that are they're doing it right, and that's the interesting thing. So maybe that was a digression, but it's definitely interesting. When we actually and this could actually be a tougher question, and maybe I'll give you a mulligan on this. We'll see. In your book, your co-author Erica Campbell described the whole process. Again, it was a really interesting story how you and your wife went through a process to choose Bloomington, Indiana, as the place to move to from. I believe you guys were in Arizona. And
That's right. Yep.
You guys started using sites like I believe it was bestplaces.com and to determine kind of the state. In this case, we're Canadian, so province, and then you guys moved to listing sites to kind of determine the city or region.
Yeah.
Now, again, there's been a lot of migration from urban settings to secondary markets.
Yeah.
Which has really been interesting a trend to follow. But here's the question: if you are a landlord or multifamily marketer or even a property manager in a secondary market, what marketing strategies or tactics would you think about employing or using from, say, your book or just in general, to attract tenants who might be thinking about leaving the big city?
Yeah, I mean, it's the exact same, right? It's answer all the questions, and the questions are not necessarily about inventory, right? So a personal example, I'm doing it again, right? So my wife and I are thinking about our kids are in uni now, and so it's like, all right, maybe it's time to get a second place somewhere else, especially, times are not great in the U.S. For a number of reasons. And so we've been looking at properties in San Miguel de Allende in central Mexico. And there are a ton of residential real estate companies there. It's a big popular area for American and Canadian expats. And so there's lots of English first agencies there, but there's really only one that has any information other than these are the properties that you can buy. And this particular agency has descriptions of each neighborhood. It's an old colonial city. And so a neighborhood might be 2 streets, but the character and culture and vibe of that neighborhood could be manifestly different than the neighborhood right adjacent to it, even though it's very, very close together.
Yeah.
And so understanding the neighborhoods and how they differ and where you might want to live versus the other place is indispensable information, indispensable to me. And I think to many buyers, but there's only one agency that has any of that information available, period. And so if I was in anything with regards to rentals or sales, it doesn't matter. I would say people are going to care about the market first, way before they care about individual properties. So the first thing you got to do is just tell them the truth about the market, right? Like, what part of town is the part of town that you might want to be in if you're this kind of person, and what about the schools, and what about the shopping, and what about the restaurants, and what about the culture, and what about essentially you need to be the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Commission. So often people in real estate say, well, there's all those other sites. The government will take care of that. The travel bureau will take care of it. Don't rely on those guys to educate your prospects. Why would you think that they're better at digital marketing and customer education than you are? That's ridiculous. I can tell you, many of them are my clients, they suck at it. Do not let somebody else be in charge of educating your prospect.
Yeah, in this case, that agency, or the people involved in that space, even multifamily, they, Central Mexico, that's a very almost a niche within a market. They could essentially own that niche.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, again, when you were talking, very stuck in that middle of the funnel, right? They're not coming up to the top of the funnel and kind of bringing it out. So
look, the reason it's called middle of the funnel is that there's something before it. And why would you yield that to someone else? It doesn't make any sense to me.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, now that you're talking about it, makes me want to actually move to Central Mexico.
Okay, together. Well, timeshare.
So thank you for that. That was I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but that was well played. You didn't have to use that mulligan. So now, again, want to kind of be careful of your time here. We're gonna, as we come to a smooth landing here, we want to kind of move into what I'd call a quick fire round, which actually I think is my favorite part of the podcast episode. And so
cool.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and I'll give you 60 seconds to answer. So Jay, are you ready?
Am I ready? Yes, I'm as ready as I'm going to get. I'm as ready as I'm going to get. Yeah, go ahead.
That wasn't the first question, but you nailed that one.
Good.
All right. Question number 1, your favorite app or tool and why?
Pre-pandemic, I would have said TripIt, because I used to travel 200 days a year and I used it every single day, all the time. Now that I don't travel, maybe CoSchedule, a terrific application that we use in the company to help manage social media, content creation, marketing, process improvement, etc.
Excellent. Question number 2, what's one thing you wish your phone could do?
I wish Siri actually worked like it was supposed to.
Yeah, that's well played there. What's question 3? What's one thing that has influenced your life greatly?
Probably starting the blog at convinceandconvert.com when I founded the company by myself in my bedroom in 2008. I started writing every day, and the blog got popular, which created the first book deal, which created the speaking business, which created. So if I hadn't have started the blog, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, I definitely read a few blog posts from you. I'm gonna quick tangent, and this could be a quick fire question. Do you think podcasting is the new blog?
Good question. I mean, in a way, yes, but the audience mechanics are a lot different because obviously podcast episodes are longer and the relationship with the audience is more intimate, because reading something is one thing, whispering into somebody's ear is a different thing. So yes, I would say that is a well-constructed comparison, but it's certainly not exactly apples to apples.
Sure, I get that. Next question. What's the most misunderstood thing about you?
I think that people, give me credit for being successful in this industry or whatever, and that's great, but it's really not at all me. Like, we have an incredible team at Convince and Convert. There's 15 people in the core, and then another 15 in sort of the second concentric circle who are supporting me every single day. And so without them, there is no me. So I just take all the credit.
Team is important for sure. Next question is, as a result of COVID, what have you changed your mind about lately?
I kind of alluded to it earlier. I would say travel, right? So I traveled 200 days a year for 16 years in a row. And then to go to literally a screeching halt. I haven't left this town, not via not via plane, not via boat, not via train. I haven't gone anywhere since first week in March. And I thought that would be a huge challenge for me. And it has been a little freaky psychologically, but I really have grown to appreciate not traveling. I guess I would tell you, Mitch, that I didn't realize how stressed out it was making me until I had to stop.
Yeah, it's interesting, and maybe I'll kind of ask you on a follow-up to that. One thing I've asked people, who are in our industry specifically is, what's one thing that has been, obviously there's been a lot of things that, businesses and people have suffered in greatly, obviously, as of, due to COVID, but what's one positive thing that's occurred that you may continue with, once once the vaccine has been deployed?
Yeah, I think some of it is keeping up with friends because you don't have as much pull on your time, right? And so that opportunity to have more leisurely phone calls and Zoom sessions and things like that with friends who are not in your town, who are not in your sort of bubble, quote unquote, definitely that. And so the other thing is not having to have conversations with the pizza delivery guy. It's like, man, you can just leave it on the step. It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, it's funny. I picked up some takeout a couple weeks ago, and they were driving. I was driving up, and it was almost like a drive-through. And I'm like, they have to continue with this because I would have to get out. It was so I'm certain things they should just start. They should recognize that this is again customer experience. So
Definitely.
Listen, where can people find more about you and what you're up to on the interwebs?
Lots of places. I'm not hard to find. Our main site is convinceandconvert.com. That's our main blog with thousands and thousands and thousands of articles and research papers for marketers and business owners. My podcast is called Social Pros, all about how large companies manage social media success day to day. And my personal site for speaking and such is jbaer.com, Baer.
Perfect. I'll put all of those in the show notes and as well as the link to your book. Jay, listen, thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure. Great to reconnect. I really appreciate the opportunity. Good talking to you.
All right. Until next time, keep swimming.
You've reached the end of another episode of Sink or Swim. Make sure to visit us at rentsync.com/podcast to access show notes, key takeaways, and where you can sign up to our newsletter to receive free bonus content. If you found value in this show, please also remember to rate, review, and subscribe. That's this week's episode of Sink or Swim. Don't forget to join us next time for another jam-packed episode. Thanks for listening.